Okay. This is a longing song. Welcome. Please stand if you'd like. When the summer sun is shining over golden land and sea, and the flowers in the hedgerow welcome butterfly and bee, then my open heart is glowing, full of warmth for everyone, and I feel an inner beauty which reflects the summer sun. When the summer clouds of thunder bring the long-awaited rain, and the thirsty soil is moistened, and the grass is green again, then I long for summer sunshine, but I know that clouds and tears are a part of life's refreshment, like the rainbow's hopes and fears. In the cool of summer evening, when the dancing insects play, and in garden, street, and meadow linger echoes of the day, then my heart is full of yearning, hopes and memories flood the whole of my being, reaching inwards to the corners of my soul.
I'm Karen Dorn-Steele, today's lay leader. I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, with greetings to our online visitors from around the United States and Canada. Today's guest speaker, the Reverend Craig Morrow, is appearing online for the second time this summer from Portland, Oregon. He's a graduate of the University of Chicago and Starr King School for the Ministry. Reverend Morrow has served churches in California, Illinois, and the Pacific Northwest, and was recently named Minister Emeritus, of Portland's Y East UU congregation after serving as minister for 6 years. So let's welcome Dr. Morrow. Now, whether you're in your sanctuary, in our sanctuary today, or watching from afar, it's here that we join to create a nourishing religious home with a mission to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in the wider world, or as we say more concisely, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Now take a few minutes to greet one another. We now turn from our informal greetings to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and individuality. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. The French Enlightenment writer François-Marie Arouet, also known more popularly as Voltaire, cast a gimlet eye on religion. Of all religions, Voltaire wrote in the 18th century, Christianity should have inspired the most tolerance, but until now, he said, Christians have been the most intolerant of all men. Today, Reverend Morrow will be taking us back to 17th century Transylvania, where Voltaire's observation was highly relevant. The brutal religious wars there were a Unitarian version of the time of troubles, to use a phrase from a more recent religious and political battle in Ireland. As we learn today about Unitarianism's battle to survive over 300 years ago, let us reflect on an excerpt from our own hymnal by James Luther Adams. I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid traditions, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship.
Please stand if you'd like to stand and join me for Spirit of Life, number 123. I'm going to sing through it twice. Stretch yourself. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the land, giving life the of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our hearts and minds, and whom we want to wrap in our love and care. We light a candle for them this morning. We also mourn the continued suffering of the Ukrainian people in Russia's vicious war, the tragic fire in Maui fueled by climate change that has killed over 100 people, with 1,000 still missing and the death toll rising daily, and our own fire victims this week in Eastern Washington as we witness climate change firsthand. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts. You are welcome to say their names, those named aloud and those remembered in the silence we hold in our community of compassion.
There's not supposed to be this long pause right now. You'll have to get up there and say, we will now gratefully give it to this
That's what I do.
right at this pause right here. This doesn't happen.
We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world. Today we have a special collection. It's for the Crosswalk Youth Shelter, which has been serving homeless teens in the midst of our housing crisis. There's an envelope within your order of service, and you can use that should you choose to contribute to our special collection.
Thank you so much. You're a man of many talents. Well, this morning's Time for All Ages is inspired by this. Do you know what this is? Any ideas? I'll let you think about it. A church is an example of a community. Whether we're talking about a Unitarian church in Transylvania 400 years ago, or our own meeting this morning in Spokane and virtually around the country, we are coming together for a reason. And whenever a group comes together, there are some agreements about how to behave with one another. It's kind of like classroom rules. It's easy to think, rules schmools. But can you imagine going back to school in a couple of weeks to a classroom with absolutely no rules? It would be total chaos. Rules, agreements, covenants are helpful things. They help us feel safe. They help us know how to treat others and how we can expect to be treated. Have you ever played Jenga? Yes, okay, that's what this is. It's a Jenga cube. The tower starts out super sturdy, right? Every block is stacked in a way that makes it pretty hard for the tower to fall down. But then what happens as you play? Yeah, you pull out the pieces, and do things start to wobble a little bit? Yeah, things start to get a little bit shaky. So the players have to pay very careful attention to how they take the pieces out and put them back on to keep the tower from toppling. A community, like a classroom or a church group, is like a Jenga tower. As members of the community, we have to pay special attention to how our words and actions might disrupt the tower. There's certainly a time and place to move things around and change the shape of our tower. It'd be pretty boring if we just let it stay in its original shape. But we need to remember our agreements to one another to keep the structure sturdy so that the game may go on. Later today, during the second service, we'll actually play some Jenga in the Thoreau room because we won't be outside this morning due to Play Club for obvious reasons. Sorry you guys have to miss that. Or stick around for a second service and you can play Jenga. So let's remember to be very careful as we move and stack these Jenga shapes in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I remember Jenga from a long time ago. As we prepare for meditation, I invite you to relax, breathe deeply, and reflect on these words by Dag Hammarskjöld, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back. Now, Reverend Craig Morrow has a reading for us.
So sorry that you're experiencing all the smoke. We have some of it down here this morning. I woke up and found it was very smoky, and I thought, I bet it's a lot worse in Spokane. So do take care of yourself and stay safe. In many church services, it's traditional to start with what you could call the old 1-2, an Old Testament reading followed by one from the New Testament. It's usually done with complete certainty that the older book is really just there to confirm the truth of everything in the newer one. The Jewish past provides a base so the Christian present can sit solidly on top of it. But if you pay close attention, you'll find that things are not quite so simple. Our first reading is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5. It's the longest of the 10 Commandments and the most detailed, from which we might reasonably conclude that it's among the most important. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work. You shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day, by which the speaker, who's supposed to be God, communicating his message through Moses, means Saturday, the day of worship for Jews. Our second reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, also chapter 5, and also very concerned with details. Think not that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I've come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle will pass from the law until it's accomplished. Whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men to do so shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Seems like the stakes are pretty high in getting even the smallest details right. And what are we supposed to do when some new part of the law seems to contradict an older one? Such religion sounds like a lot of work, when we thought that worship was supposed to be about taking some time out from all of our labors to enjoy things like listening to stories, singing together, and sharing meals together. But what if choosing which food to share becomes a problem? And how about music? How about it? How about some music right now? Thanks so much, Dick. Yeah, love is something quite extraordinary, isn't it? Pennsylvania. Something tickled my memory. Wasn't there an anthropologist who'd done research in 20th century Africa whose observations fit with what I was reading about Eastern Europe in the 15 and 1600s? Mary something. Mary Douglas. That's it. But what was it that she had said? Fortunately, I had just the right person to ask. My wife, Pamela, is an anthropologist, recently retired as a full professor of anthropology. She gave me an instant summary of Douglas's views. One idea was about cleanness and uncleanness. Dirt is misplaced matter, and what matters most is not where it's supposed to be, according to some groups' rules. Not what it is, but it's not where it's supposed to be. Blood is a good example. Ancient Hebrews and modern Jews take great pains to remove every trace of it from food, while others can consume it freely, sometimes fresh from the animal. The next idea is about categories. Proper placement is not only a matter of physical location. We also want things to fit into a clearly defined category. So for Jews, again, pigs are a problem because they have a hoof, but don't chew cud like other hoofed animals. And can we have this slide that I sent in of a strange looking animal? There we go. The pangolin is a mammal that looks like a reptile with scales. It looks like a reptile, but it has scales like a fish with no teeth at all. It lays eggs, but nurses its young. So what the heck is it? Should eating it be taboo or maybe reserved for exceptional people as a sign of their exceptionalness? And we can take the slide down now. Thank you. Pam added that some of Douglas's most important ideas are about the human body itself. During times of intense social stress, such as persecution of one group by another, the group under assault may react by trying to exercise extreme control over the bodies of its members, particularly with regard to food and sexuality. Any extraordinary threats or pressures? That's the sort of question an experienced researcher asks a novice like me. I'll tell you about the situation of these early Unitarians and see how you think we should answer that question about extraordinary pressures. I spoke last time about the betrayal of Francis David, the Unitarian leader, by his longtime friend Giorgio Biandrata. He felt that David had gone too far in his preaching when he denounced the practice of worshiping Jesus. David had said Jesus was a man, divinely inspired, yes, but not some new category of God-man. After David's imprisonment, Biandrata called together all the Unitarian ministers who'd shared David's views and threatened them with a similar fate to David's if they would not sign an agreement renouncing these radical thoughts. You may have heard that our ministers today are required to waive their rights to due process and legal counsel if they are to remain members in good standing of the current UU Ministers Association. Boy. Well, over the following years, things went from bad to worse. 5 ministers were publicly beheaded. Soon, the Austro-Hungarian Emperor Rudolf claims Transylvania as his own. Unitarian historian Earl Morris Wilbur calls him, quote, an eccentric, absolutist Catholic who was determined to eliminate Protestantism from the land. Acting through his general, George Basta, he had ministers tortured, skinned alive, or roasted slowly over piles of their burning books. Soldiers raped Protestant women and children. In time, no horses or oxen were left, so people, who were shifted now into the category of draft animals, pulled plows in teams of 10. Food prices skyrocketed. Famine raged, and soon people were forced to eat dogs, cats, animal skins, toasted bones, and sometimes, yes, each other. I'm sure they would have preferred pangolins, but there you have it. The fury of politics, power, and religion combined and weaponized, worse than anthrax, displacing, dirtying, and destroying everything in its path. It was under these circumstances that Sabbatarian movements began taking shape in the region. Even before the death of Francis David, there were reports that many Unitarians were looking more to the Old Testament than the New for guidance in their worship and daily lives. One worried Catholic wrote that Unitarian ministers in certain areas had all begun to abstain from blood and pork. When it comes to food, you can only abstain from what others continue to take into their bodies, and that now separates you from them. Good heavens, what's to come next? Well, you can guess. What about that command to observe the Sabbath on the seventh day, Saturday? Early Christian communities have been divided on the question, and some took Jesus' words about fulfilling every jot and tittle of the law to mean stick with Saturday. Later, Constantine, the first Christian emperor, decreed Sunday as a common day of worship. And an emperor's opinion has a certain force. People looking around Transylvania knew the force of Emperor Rudolph's opinions, but instead of deciding to play it safe religiously, many chose to go the opposite direction. Besides keeping a Saturday Sabbath, avoiding blood, pork, and other foods deemed unclean by the Old Testament, they also began to observe that book's days of fasting, feasting, and to practice circumcision for all males. Yes, ouch! But you get the idea. What was it that Mary Douglas said about groups under pressure? They might react by trying to exercise extreme control over the bodies of their members, particularly with regard to food and sexuality. Eat this, cut that. Andrew Aosi was a follower of Francis David. He was a nobleman who'd lost his wife and children to disease that struck in their home. He began a close study of the Bible while he too was convalescing from illness and soon became convinced of many Seventh-day or Sabbatarian views. Though a layperson, he began a prophetic mission of preaching these views, first to family and neighbors and then beyond. He'd been down, but he was not out, much like the Unitarian community as a whole in those days, down but not out. He began to compose hymns, poems, and essays promoting the Sabbatarian way. Unitarians could no longer gain access to printing presses. You remember how important those were in my last sermon. So Aosi paid for these to be hand-copied, his writings. Such handmade texts appearing in what was now a sea of print must have enhanced the special feeling of the ideas that they contained. Many people received them eagerly and asked for more. Others greeted them with horror. What do you mean Jesus is the Messiah and the greatest of the prophets, but not the Son of God? Mosaic law with its dietary restrictions, circumcision for males, and strict Saturday Sabbaths with no work allowed, does that still hold for Christians? What kind of religion is this? It was like a spiritual pangolin that seemed to fit no category at all. By 1600, though the majority of Sabbatarians in the area were Unitarians, the majority of Unitarians were not Sabbatarians, but they were getting uncomfortable. Teachings about God and Jesus were mostly the same in both branches. The difference was in religious practice. Sometimes that's where we feel the differences the most. We can voice somewhat different beliefs and say, oh, how interesting, I never thought of that. But if we actually do something different, our hackles go up, especially when it involves the body. Differences become less interesting and more disturbing. If pork and blood are unclean for you, but I still consume them, does that make me unclean. If you consecrate Saturday as a day of rest, but I have to work to get the crops in, does that make me a sinner in your eyes? If you believe that circumcision is required for all men to be holy, do I dare to go to sleep when you live next door in a house full of knives and scissors? You can see how easy it would be for our imaginations to spin out of control. Sometimes religious teachings get ahead of practice, which needs time to catch up. No doubt the Sabbatarians felt that they were simply taking the teachings they shared with most Unitarians to the next practical level. Those other Unitarians may have felt that their Seventh-day brothers and sisters were letting practice get ahead of thinking things through. It's possible for that to happen, even here today. For example, let's try a show of hands. We can do this in Zoombox or Sanctuary, depending on where you are. How many of you are strict vegetarians? Vegans? How many avoid red meat, preferring fish and poultry? How many like to have a big old juicy steak at least once a week? How does that fit with your religious beliefs or our shared UU principles? How many of us are designated organ donors? How does that fit? How many of us plan to be buried in a coffin? Who has purchased space in a mausoleum above ground? Who has let your family know that you prefer cremation? Why? Does that fit with respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, or for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part? I think you could explain how it does fit for you, but it would seem very strange if you also began insisting on cremation or vegetarianism or a high-protein, all-meat diet for everyone here on pain of being excluded from religious fellowship. That would seem very contrary to the spirit of this church, but it's the kind of thing that often happens in religious history. It's happening today, as those in our movement who devoutly believe in certain theories seek to punish and exclude those who do not find its assertions to be convincing or helpful, and who do not want to see such theories replace our religion of free thought and expression with one that treats every human interaction of one of oppressor versus oppressed. Briefly, it looked like Sabbatarianism might win the day, or at least win an enduring place as an alternative Unitarian community alongside the Sunday service goers. Simon Pecci was a talented scholar who had been hired as a tutor for the three sons of Andrew Aossi, the man behind those handmade books. Aossi recognized his brilliance and sent him abroad to study in such places as the Ottoman capital, Istanbul, Italy, North Africa, Spain, and France. He returned fluent in 12 languages and with a profound knowledge of Jewish learning, plus no doubt some firsthand knowledge of Islam, which also affirms one God only and no funny stuff about the divine reality existing as three distinct persons. Aossi's sons had died, and he made Pecci his heir to his substantial fortunes and estates. He entered public service, became an advisor to several princes, and was for a time, quote, the most powerful man in Transylvania, until he fell victim to political intrigue among local nobles. Things could have turned out differently, and we too might have been meeting on Saturdays and being very careful about what flesh we eat, what skin we cut, and where and when we cut it. Sabbatarian groups would arise from time to time from the Reformation to the present, and some have become established churches with their own institutions of learning. Some have had a great deal of influence on our daily lives. Another show of hands. How many of us had cereal for breakfast this morning? No one ate food like this before the labors of the great Seventh-day Adventist dietary reformers like John Harvey Kellogg. The Seventh-day Unitarians left us nothing like cornflakes or Special K. They dwindled until there was just one congregation left. When in 1867, the Hungarian government passed measures ensuring the safety of Jews in the region, that last congregation chose to adopt Judaism. Local Jews were willing to adopt and embrace them as well. And so ended the story of an unusual church as the story of an unusual synagogue began. Can we have our funny looking animal again on the screen, the pangolin? There he, she, or it is. I hope I'll get a chance to visit that congregation someday to see how they've mixed this and that like the pangolin does. You can turn the pangolin off. And what they've done with their space to express their unique vision and purpose in the world. Just as I always look forward to seeing what you'll do next with yours as you grow into a national, even international free religious congregation. You're that already, right? I guess you're something like a pangolin. A bit of this, a bit of that, and that's just fine with me. I like pangolins and the way they don't seem to fit any category. They're complex, interesting, and beautiful. I trust that what you are making here together will always be beautifully complex and interesting too. So may it be.
Thank you, Craig. Please stand if you would like and join me for the last song in the hymnal 338, I Seek the Spirit of a Child. I seek the spirit of a child, the child who meets life naturally, the child who sings the world alive and greets the morning sun with glee. Children are real beyond all art. May I see joy's a gift to our heart. I seek the freedom of a child who loves instinctively, who lights our day with just a smile and shines that light on all we see. Children are real beyond all fears. May I see hope's a gift to our tears. I seek the wonder of a child who sees delightfully. No clowns in cloud, no golden sun, imaginations true and free. Children are real beyond all lies. May I see faith's a gift to our eyes.
As we depart today, having heard a fascinating chapter in our religion's history, I leave you with the words of Yale history professor Timothy Snyder, a scholar of 20th century religious and political catastrophes, on how to be a patriot. Stand out. Someone has to. It is easy in words and deeds to follow along. It can feel strange to say and do something different. But without that unease, there is no freedom. And the moment you set an example, the spell of the status quo is broken and others will follow. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.